The council chamber stretched wide and tall, filled with representatives from 300 worlds. Floating platforms held delegates of every imaginable shape and size. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had crystalline bodies that caught the light. At the very back, on the smallest platform, sat Ambassador Elena Kovac of Earth. She had attended 47 council sessions in the past 2 years. 47 times she had requested that humanity be allowed full membership. 47 times she had been denied. Today would be 48. The Velthari representative rose from his platform. His blue skin shimmered as he spoke. His voice amplified across the chamber. The matter before us is simple. The humans of Earth request once again to join this council, and once again we must refuse. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her face neutral. She had learned not to show emotion here. The other species saw human emotions as signs of instability. Earth is a Class 12 death world, the Velthari continued. A planet so violent, so hostile, that it breeds creatures of terrible capability. The humans survived on a world that should have killed them. They evolved to fight, to conquer, to destroy. They are dangerous. Other delegates murmured agreement. Elena had heard it all before. Earth had too much gravity. Earth had predators that could kill with claws and teeth. Earth had weather that could flatten cities. Earth had diseases, had volcanoes, had earthquakes. And somehow humans had not only survived but thrived. The galaxy found this terrifying. Their ships are built like weapons, another delegate added. They over-engineer everything. Their military trains constantly. They have a history of war spanning their entire civilization. Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that humans built strong ships because they had to learn to survive harsh conditions. She wanted to say that yes, humans had fought wars, but they had also made peace, had built art, had created music and poetry and philosophy. But she had said all this before. The council did not want to hear it. The vote was called. 300 delegates voted. Only 12 voted in favor of humanity. The rest voted to maintain the quarantine zones around human space. Humans could trade in designated areas, but they could not travel freely. They could not join the galactic community. Elena gathered her papers and left the chamber. Another failure to report back to Earth. Across the galaxy on a world called Tarsus Euphor, Crystalline Song of Morning stood in her garden and felt the wind move through her crystalline body. The Ephrati were a peaceful people. Their bodies were made of living crystal that sang when the wind touched them. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of war. They had lived on Tarsus 4 for 3 generations, building beautiful cities that reflected light like prisms. They grew food in harmony with the land. They sang songs that could be heard for miles. Now their sky was dark with ships. Crystalline Song of Morning was the colony administrator. She had sent the first distress call 2 days ago when the Kresh swarm arrived. The Kresh were pirates, raiders who took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not take. They had demanded the Ephrati leave their world. When the Ephrati asked for time to evacuate, the Kresh had laughed and opened fire. 3 cities were already burning. 40,000 Ephrati huddled in shelters singing their death songs. They had no way to fight back. Their ships were not built for war. Their people had never held weapons. The distress call had gone out to the entire galaxy. Surely someone would come. Surely the council would send help. But days passed and no help arrived. On the council homeworld, the delegates received the Ephrati distress call. They held an emergency session. They debated jurisdiction. Tarsus 4 was in a disputed zone, technically outside council protection. The nearest council fleet was 3 weeks away. The Kresh were dangerous. Engaging them might cause a larger conflict. They formed a committee to study the issue. They would reconvene in 5 days to discuss options. The Ephrati did not have 5 days. The distress call continued broadcasting on all frequencies, automated and desperate. It reached trade stations and colony worlds. It reached merchant ships and explorers. And it reached human space. Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen sat in his office on the orbital station above Earth. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and scars from 3 decades of service. He had fought pirates, had rescued stranded ships, had kept the peace in the border regions where human space met the rest of the galaxy. His communications officer brought him the Ephrati distress call. Chen listened to it twice, his face growing darker. "How long until they're overrun?" he asked. "Intelligence estimates 6 days, sir. Maybe less." Chen pulled up the files on the Ephrati. He remembered them. 3 years ago, They had voted against humanity's council membership. The Ephrati delegate had called humans unsuited for civilized society. It did not matter. How fast can we get there? Chen asked. His navigation officer ran the numbers. Tarsus 4 is at the edge of our operational range. We could get the Third Fleet there in 10 days if we push the engines hard. Too long, Chen said. What if we push them harder? The officer looked nervous. Sir, running the slipspace drives that hot is dangerous. Council vessels would never. Council vessels can't do what we can do, Chen interrupted. We're human. We built our ships to handle stress. Calculate the fastest possible route. I don't care if we burn out half the drive cores. Those people are dying. Yes, sir. Chen stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth. His homeworld, the death world that the galaxy feared. Down there were 8 billion humans who had clawed their way up from caves to space stations. They had survived ice ages and plagues, predators and disasters. They had learned to build, to adapt, to overcome. And they had learned one more thing. When someone needed help, you helped them. Prep the Third Fleet, Chen ordered. I want every ship ready to launch in 4 hours. We're going to Tarsus 4. Sir, we don't have council authorization. I don't care. Load weapons, stock supplies, and get me a channel to the Ephrati colony. I want them to know help is coming. The officer saluted and left. Chen looked back at Earth one more time. The planet that had tried to kill humanity for millions of years. The planet that had made them strong enough to survive anything. Now that strength would save someone else. 4 hours later, the Third Fleet launched from Earth orbit. 12 heavy cruisers, 37 frigates, and the carrier Indomitable. Every ship was crewed by humans who knew they were violating council law. Every captain knew they might be court-martialed for this. None of them hesitated. Admiral Chen sat on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars stretch into lines as they entered slipspace. They were pushing the engines to dangerous levels, traveling faster than any council ship would dare. All ships report ready, sir, his executive officer said. Chen nodded. Send a message to the Ephrati colony. Tell them the Third Fleet is coming. Tell them to hold on. On Tarsus 4, Crystalline's Song of Morning received the message. She read it 3 times, unable to believe it. The humans were coming. The monsters the galaxy feared, the species that had been rejected from the council, the Deathworlders who everyone said were too dangerous. They were coming to save people who had voted against them. She began to weep, her tears forming tiny crystals that caught the light. The Third Fleet tore through slipspace like a knife through water. Inside the carrier Indomitable, alarms blared constantly. The engines were running far beyond their designed limits. Heat warnings flashed on every display. Human engineers worked around the clock, bypassing safety systems and rerouting power. Any other species would have considered this insane. Council regulations strictly forbade this kind of engine stress. But humans had built their ships differently. Every system had backups. Every backup had backups. Human ships were designed to take damage and keep flying. Admiral Chen walked through the ship talking to his crew. He saw young officers who had never been in real combat. He saw veteran Marines checking their weapons for the 100th time. He saw engineers with oil-stained hands grabbing a few minutes of sleep wherever they could. How are you holding up? He asked a young navigator named Lu. Honestly, sir, I'm terrified, Lu admitted. But those people need us. Chen put a hand on the young man's shoulder. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right anyway. In the medical bay, Dr. Sarah Palmer prepared for casualties. She had converted every available space into emergency treatment areas. She had trained her staff on Ephrati biology, learning everything they could about crystalline life forms in case they needed to treat the civilians below. We're going to lose people, aren't we? Her assistant asked quietly. Palmer did not look up from her work. Probably, but we'll save more than we lose. That's what matters. On Tarsus 4, the situation grew worse by the hour. The Kresh swarm had landed ground forces. They moved through the Ephrati settlements, destroying everything. The Ephrati tried to hide, but their crystalline bodies reflected light. They were easy to find. Crystalline's Song of Morning huddled with 500 of her people in an underground shelter. She could hear explosions above. She kept checking her communicator, hoping for an update from the human fleet. They're not coming, someone whispered. No one is coming. They're coming, Crystalline's Song of Morning said firmly. The humans are coming. The Kresh warlord Threx the Render stood on his command ship and surveyed his fleet. 100 warships surrounded the planet. He had more than enough firepower to turn the surface to glass. But where was the fun in that? His troops enjoyed hunting the crystal creatures. Each one shattered so beautifully when killed. His sensor officer alerted him to new contacts. Ships dropping out of slipspace at the system's edge. Identify them, Threx ordered. The officer ran the scan. His scales paled. Sir, they're human. Threx laughed. He had heard stories about humans. The Council's pet monsters. Too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space. But they were banned from interfering in galactic affairs. What were a dozen human ships going to do against his 100? Hail them, Threx said. I want to hear what they have to say. The communication came through. A human male with gray hair and hard eyes appeared on the screen. Kresh Fleet. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation 3rd Fleet. You are ordered to cease hostile operations and withdraw immediately. This is your only warning. Threx laughed harder. Human, you have no authority here. Leave now and I won't add your ships to my collection. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Last chance. Threx cut the communication and opened fire. His forward ships launched missiles at the human fleet. On the Indomitable, Chen watched the incoming missiles. Defensive systems active. All ships weapons free. Show them what Earth made us. The human fleet moved forward. Their shields took the first missile impacts, flaring bright blue. Then the human ships returned fire. Threx had never seen weapons like these. The human missiles moved faster than anything he had encountered. They dodged his countermeasures. They struck with devastating force. 3 of his ships disappeared in nuclear fireballs. Close in, Threx ordered. Surround them. The Kresh fleet swarmed forward. They had numbers. They would overwhelm these humans with sheer firepower, but humans fought differently. A human frigate, the Resolute, took heavy fire. Her shields collapsed. Armor plating blew away. Fire vented from a dozen breaches. Any council ship would have retreated. The Resolute's captain, Maria Torres, had other ideas. All power to engines, she ordered. Ram that dreadnought. Her crew didn't question the order. The Resolute accelerated, her damaged engines screaming. She slammed into the Kresh dreadnought at full speed. Both ships exploded in a blast that lit up the entire battle. Threx watched in disbelief. They're insane. But that was only the beginning. Human boarding pods launched from the fleet, kinetic projectiles carrying Marines directly at Kresh ships. The Kresh tried to shoot them down, but the pods were small and fast. They punched through armor and disgorged their cargo. Human Marines flooded into Kresh ships. The Kresh were bigger, stronger, evolved on a heavy gravity world. They were apex predators, but humans were from Earth, a death world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Humans had evolved to fight creatures with claws and teeth. They had learned to use tools, to work together, to never give up. Sergeant James Hendricks led his squad through a Kresh ship's corridors. They moved fast, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. When a Kresh warrior charged them, Hendricks shot it twice, then crushed its skull with his rifle butt when it kept coming. Deathworlders, the Kresh screamed, falling back in panic. Above the planet, the space battle raged. Human fighters launched from the Indomitable, piloted by men and women who pulled G-forces that would kill most species. Captain Sarah Okonkwo led her squadron through the Kresh formation, dodging fire, taking impossible shots. A Kresh battleship got a lock on her. She banked hard, feeling the acceleration press her into her seat. Her vision narrowed. Blood roared in her ears. She held the turn, pulled out at the last second, and fired all her missiles into the battleship's engines. On Tarsus 4, the Ephrati watched the battle through their shelter's sensors. They had never seen anything like this. The humans were dying. Ships were exploding. But they kept fighting. They kept pushing forward. Why? Someone asked. Why would they do this for us? Crystalline Song of Morning had no answer. Admiral Chen coordinated the battle from the Indomitable. They had lost 4 ships already. 3 more were critically damaged. Over 2,000 of his people were dead or wounded. But they were winning. The Kresh fleet was breaking apart. Threx's carefully organized formation had dissolved into chaos. Human ships pressed their advantage, targeting the command vessels, disrupting communications. Sir, enemy flagship is trying to flee, an officer reported. Don't let it, Chen ordered. 3 human cruisers pursued Threx's ship, hammering it with fire. Its shields collapsed. Its engines died. The ship went dark. The remaining Kresh vessels saw their warlord's ship crippled. They broke and ran, scattering in every direction. 90 minutes after the battle began, it was over. The Kresh swarm was shattered, running for their lives. Chen surveyed the damage reports. 4 ships destroyed, 3 more barely holding together, nearly 2,000 casualties. They had paid a heavy price, but the Ephrati were alive. Open a channel to the planet, Chen ordered. Crystalline Song of Morning's face appeared on his screen, her crystalline features reflecting the light. Tarsus 4, this is Admiral Chen. The immediate threat is neutralized. We're establishing a defensive perimeter. Medical teams are preparing to land. You're safe now. Crystalline Song of Morning stared at him. Tears formed in her crystalline eyes, tiny diamonds that caught the light. Why, we voted against you. We called you unsuited for civilization. Why would you come? Chen thought about Earth, about the death world that made humanity strong, about the values that world had taught them. Because you called for help, he said simply. That's what we do. The news traveled fast across the galaxy, faster than governments could control, faster than the Council could suppress. Every species with access to the galactic network saw the footage from Tarsus 4. They saw human ships absorbing fire meant for civilians. They saw the Resolute sacrifice itself to destroy a Kresh dreadnought. They saw Marines fighting in conditions that would kill any other species. They saw over 2,000 humans give their lives for people they had never met, people who had voted against them. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours. The chamber filled quickly, delegates arriving from across known space. The mood was tense, angry. Ambassador Elena Kovac took her place on the small platform at the back. She had been recalled from Earth as soon as the news broke. She knew what was coming. The Veltari representative stood first, his blue skin dark with fury. The humans have violated every protocol. They entered disputed space without authorization. They engaged in military action without council approval. They interfered in local affairs. This is exactly why we cannot trust them. Other delegates joined in. The humans were reckless, dangerous. They had proven that the quarantine was necessary. They should face sanctions, penalties, perhaps even stricter restrictions. Elena listened quietly. She had prepared a speech, had practiced her defense. But as she listened to the accusations, she realized she didn't want to defend humanity's actions. She wanted to challenge the Council's inaction. When her turn came to speak, she stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. The Terran Federation received a distress call, she began. Her voice was calm, steady. 40,000 civilians faced extermination. We had the capability to help. We chose to act. You violated council law. The Veltari interrupted. We saved lives, Elena replied. What did the council do? You received the same distress call. You formed a committee. You debated jurisdiction. You discussed whether helping might cause political complications. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from hundreds of worlds. While you talked, people were dying. While you debated, children were being hunted. While you worried about protocols, the Kresh swarm burned cities. So yes, we violated your laws. We will do it again if necessary. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted over each other. Some demanded Elena be removed. Others called for immediate sanctions against humanity. But some stayed quiet, listening. On Tarsus 4, Admiral Chen's fleet worked to secure the planet. Human engineers landed on the surface, helping the Ephrati rebuild their destroyed cities. Marines patrolled the ruins, searching for survivors. Medical teams treated thousands of wounded civilians. Dr. Palmer set up a field hospital in what remained of the capital city. She worked 20-hour days treating Ephrati who had never seen a human before. Many of them flinched when she approached. They had been taught to fear humans. It's okay, she would say gently. I'm here to help. Slowly the fear faded. The Ephrati saw humans working themselves to exhaustion to save strangers. They saw Marines give their own food to hungry children. They saw engineers risk their lives clearing rubble to find trapped survivors. Crystalline Song of Morning walked through the refugee camps, speaking with her people. The same question came up again and again. Why would the humans do this? She had no answer. It made no sense. Every species in the galaxy acted in their own interest. That was how things worked. You helped your allies. You protected your trade partners. You defended your territory. You didn't cross the galaxy to save people who had voted against you. She found Admiral Chen standing at a memorial being built for the fallen human crew. The names of the dead were being carved into stone, over 2,000 names. "We're placing this in the central square," Chen explained, "so your people will remember." "We could never forget," Crystalline Song of Morning said quietly. She looked at the names. So many, so young. They died for us. People they never met. "They died doing what was right," Chen corrected. "There's a difference. Your council will punish you for this." "Probably," Chen shrugged. "Doesn't matter. It matters to me," Crystalline Song of Morning said firmly. "It matters to my people. The galaxy needs to know what you did here." She made a decision then. She contacted every news service, every broadcast station, every information network she could reach. She told them the story of Tarsus IV. She told them how the council had debated while her people died. She told them how the humans came anyway, and she showed them the footage. The galaxy watched human ships taking fire meant for civilians. They watched the resolute sacrifice. They watched Marines fighting through impossible conditions. They watched humans die to save people who had called them monsters. Public opinion began to shift. On the council homeworld, delegates started receiving messages from their home governments. Citizens were demanding answers. Why hadn't the council helped? Why had it taken humans to do what the council should have done? The Velthari representative tried to maintain control. "The humans are dangerous. This incident proves it. They have no respect for law, for protocol, for the established order." But his arguments rang hollow now. Other delegates started speaking up. The Krithari representative stood, his scaled face thoughtful. "Perhaps we have been asking the wrong questions," he said slowly. "We feared humans because they are strong, because they come from a dangerous world. But strength used to protect the weak. Is that not admirable? They violated our laws," the Velthari insisted. "And saved 40,000 lives," the Krithari replied. "While we followed our laws and did nothing." The debate continued for days. The galaxy watched, waiting to see what would happen. Some species called for the human quarantine to be lifted. Others insisted it must be strengthened. The council was divided. Then another distress call came. The Hexathi Consortium, a full council member, was under attack. The same Kresh pirates regrouped and seeking revenge. They had hit a Hexathi colony world with overwhelming force. Thousands were dying. The nearest council fleet was 3 weeks away. Admiral Chen received the distress call on Tarsus IV. His fleet was barely functional. The damaged ships needed weeks of repairs. His crew was exhausted. They had just fought a desperate battle, and the Hexathi had voted for the human quarantine. Twice. Every species in the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do. Chen called a meeting of his senior officers. They gathered in the Indomitables briefing room looking worn and tired. "You've all seen the distress call," Chen said. "The Hexathi are dying. We're the only ones close enough to help." His executive officer spoke up.
"Sir, our ships are held together with patches and prayers.
"We've got 3 cruisers that can barely maintain orbit. Our casualty lists are still being compiled, and the Hexathi voted against us." "I know," Chen said. "The council will definitely punish us this time," another officer added. "We'll be court-martialed for sure. Probably imprisoned." "I know," Chen repeated. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what Chen was asking. Go back into battle exhausted and damaged. Risk more lives. For people who had rejected them. Captain Sarah Okonkwo, her fighter wing having lost 30% of its pilots, stood up. "When do we leave, sir?" One by one the other officers stood. Damaged ships or not. Exhausted or not. The Hexathi needed help, and humans answered when people called for help. Chen felt pride swell in his chest. These were his people. Deathworlders from a planet that had tried to kill them. Strong because they had to be. Brave because anything less meant death. And compassionate because they remembered what it was like to need help. "Prep the fleet," Chen ordered. "We leave in 6 hours." Word spread quickly. The 3rd fleet was going to help the Hexathi. The damaged, exhausted human fleet was going back into battle. And then something unprecedented happened. Crystalline Song of Morning stood in the communications center and made a broadcast to the entire galaxy. Her crystalline face reflected the lights around her, making her seem to glow. "I am Crystalline Song of Morning, administrator of Tarsus IV. My people were dying. The galaxy ignored our calls, but humanity answered." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Now the humans prepare to leave. to help another world in need. Their ships are damaged, their people are exhausted, they have already given so much, but they will go anyway because that is who they are. She looked directly into the camera. We stand with Terra. Any Ephrati who wishes to join the human fleet as volunteers, I authorize you to do so. Medical staff, engineers, whatever capacity you can serve. We will not let humanity stand alone. Within an hour, 300 Ephrati had volunteered. Most were medical personnel. The Ephrati had advanced medical technology, adapted for their crystalline biology, but applicable to other species. They boarded the human ships, working alongside human doctors to prepare for casualties. But the Ephrati were not alone. A Krathari merchant captain named Vex brought his cargo hauler to Tarsus IV. The ship was massive, designed to move goods between star systems. Vex had spent 3 days welding weapons onto his ship, missile pods salvaged from destroyed Kresh vessels. Point defense guns bought from a black market dealer. It looked ridiculous, a cargo ship pretending to be a warship. "I'm coming with you," Vex told Admiral Chen. "You're a civilian," Chen said. "This isn't your fight." Vex's scales rippled in what his species used as a smile. 20 years ago, my colony was attacked by raiders. We called for help. No one came. We survived barely. I swore if I ever had the chance to help someone else, I would. So I'm coming. A Solan explorer named Kira arrived next. Her ship was fast, built for deep space reconnaissance. "You'll need scouts," she said simply. "I'm good at not being seen." More ships arrived, a dozen civilian vessels from as many species. They had all heard the same story. They had all watched the footage from Tarsus IV. They had all seen what humanity did. And they wanted to be part of it. Admiral Chen stood on the landing pad watching the mismatched fleet assemble. Warships and cargo haulers, military vessels and civilian scouts, humans and aliens working side by side. His executive officer stood beside him, looking worried. "Sir, most of these ships aren't military. They have minimal weapons, no armor, no training." "I know," Chen said. "They're going to get in the way. Or worse, get themselves killed." Chen turned to look at his officer. "They're here because they believe in something. They're here because they watched us do the right thing and they want to do it too. We can't turn them away." He called a meeting of all the captains, human and alien alike. They gathered in the Indomitable's hangar bay, the only space large enough to hold them all. Chen stood on a cargo container so everyone could see him. "I want to be clear about what we're flying into," he began. "The Kresh swarm has 300 ships at Hexathi. We have 12 human warships, most of them damaged, plus your civilian vessels." He looked around at the assembled captains. Humans, Ephrati, Krathari, Solan, and a dozen other species. "We're outnumbered. We're outgunned. Some of us won't come back. I can't promise you victory. I can't even promise you survival." The hangar was silent. But those people calling for help deserve the same chance we gave the Ephrati. They deserve someone to answer their call. If you want to turn back, I understand. There's no shame in it. No one moved. Vex the Krathari spoke up, his voice carrying across the hangar. "We're not here for glory, Admiral. We're here because it's right." Chen felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Then let's go save some lives." The combined fleet launched 6 hours later. 12 damaged human warships surrounded by 30 civilian vessels turned military. They jumped into slipspace heading for Hexathi territory. On the Hexathi homeworld, Governor Thelon watched the skies darken with Kresh ships. His people were dying. He had sent distress calls to everyone. The council promised help was coming, but their fleet was weeks away. Then his communications officer brought him a message. A fleet was approaching, not the council fleet. Something else. "Who is it?" Thelon demanded. "Sir, it's the humans, the third fleet from Tarsus IV." Thelon felt his heart skip a beat. The humans, the Deathworlders. The species he had voted to keep quarantined because they were too dangerous. They were coming to save his people. The combined fleet dropped out of slipspace at the edge of Hexathi space. Admiral Chen surveyed the tactical display. 300 Kresh ships surrounded the planet, It was worse than the battle at Tarsus 4. All ships battle stations, Chen ordered. Civilian vessels, maintain formation behind the warships. You're our second line. Provide support fire and stay alive. Captain Sarah Okonkwo was already in her fighter, ready to launch. Wing leaders sound off. Her remaining pilots checked in. They had lost so many at Tarsus the 4, but the ones who remained were veterans now, hardened by combat. The Kresh spotted the approaching fleet. Their commander, a brutal warrior named Kresh, laughed when he saw the numbers. 40 ships against his 300? This would be a massacre. He opened a channel. Humans. You should have stayed in your quarantine. Now you'll die with these Hexathi cowards. Admiral Chen's response was calm. You said that at Tarsus 4, too. How did that work out? Kresh snarled and cut the channel. All ships, destroy them. The Kresh fleet surged forward like a wave of death. 300 warships moving to overwhelm the small human fleet. Chen watched them come. All ships, remember your training, protect each other. Watch your flanks and make every shot count. The fleets collided in a storm of fire. Human warships took the first impacts, their shields flaring bright. They returned, fire with deadly accuracy, every shot carefully aimed. One human missile often destroyed or crippled a Kresh ship, but there were so many Kresh. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The civilian vessels hung back, providing support fire. Vex's cargo hauler launched missiles in wild volleys, hitting more by luck than skill. Kira's scout ship darted through the battle, marking targets for the human warships. Ifrati medical teams worked frantically as casualties began arriving. They treated humans and other species alike, their crystalline hands moving with delicate precision. On the planet below, Governor Thelen watched the battle through his sensors. The small fleet was holding but barely. They were being overwhelmed by numbers. Why are they doing this? His aide asked. We voted against them. We called them dangerous. Thelen had no answer. In space, the battle grew more desperate. A human cruiser, the Defiant, lost all shields. Fire tore through its hull. The captain, Commander James Wu, saw a dozen Kresh ships moving to finish them off. All power to weapons, Wu ordered. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. The Defiant fired every weapon at once, a desperate final barrage. 3 Kresh ships exploded, but the return fire was overwhelming. Then Vex's cargo hauler moved between the Defiant and the Kresh fleet. The massive civilian ship took the hits meant for the cruiser, its makeshift armor buckling under the fire. Get out of there, Wu shouted on the comm. Not yet, Vex replied. His ship was dying, but he kept it between the Kresh and the crippled cruiser. Save as many as you can, human. Make it count. The cargo hauler exploded, buying the Defiant time to retreat behind the human lines. All across the battlefield, similar sacrifices played out. Civilian ships protecting warships, damaged vessels covering retreats, species that had never met before dying for each other. Captain Okonkwo led her fighters through the chaos, taking impossible shots, dodging fire that should have killed her. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and will. A Kresh fighter got on her tail. She couldn't shake it. She prepared for the impact. Then a Solan scout ship appeared from nowhere, ramming the Kresh fighter and saving her life. Kira's voice came over the comm, strained but alive. Owe me a drink, human. You got it, Okonkwo shouted, pulling into another attack run. Admiral Chen coordinated the battle from the Indomitable, watching his fleet fight and die. They were losing. The Kresh had too many ships, but they were holding long enough for the Hexathi to evacuate civilians to shelters. Every minute they bought was thousands of lives saved. Sir, Council fleet just entered the system, an officer reported. Chen felt a surge of hope. Finally, reinforcements. But the Council fleet didn't engage. They held position at the system's edge, watching humanity and its civilian allies die trying to save a world the Council had abandoned. Admiral Chen saw the Council fleet holding position at the edge of the system and felt cold anger flow through him. They were watching. Just watching while people died. Ignore them, he ordered his crew. Focus on the Kresh. The battle raged on. The human fleet was being torn apart. 5 more warships were gone, crippled or destroyed. The civilian vessels had lost half their number. Bodies floated in space, human and alien alike, but they were winning. The Kresh had lost over 100 ships. Their formations were breaking down. Their attacks were becoming desperate instead of coordinated. The small fleet had hurt them badly. Commander Kresh watched his forces being decimated by the tiny human fleet and their ragtag allies. This was impossible. He had 300 ships. How were these humans still fighting? Then he understood. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to buy time. Every minute the battle continued was another minute for the Hexathi to evacuate civilians. Target the planet, Kresh ordered. Forget the fleet. Kill the civilians. 50 Kresh ships broke formation and dove toward Hexathi. Ignoring the human fleet entirely, they charged their weapons, preparing for orbital bombardment. On the surface, Governor Thelen saw them coming. There was nothing he could do. His world had no orbital defenses. In minutes, his cities would burn. Admiral Chen saw the Kresh ships diving for the planet. His fleet was out of position. They couldn't intercept in time. Indomitable, plot intercept course, Chen ordered. All power to engines. Sir, we can't reach them in time, his navigator protested. We have to try. The Indomitable and 3 remaining cruisers burned hard, racing to intercept the Kresh bombardment fleet. They fired missiles, took long-range shots, anything to slow the enemy down. It wasn't enough. The Kresh ships reached bombardment range. Then something remarkable happened. From the Council fleet at the system's edge, a single ship broke formation. Then another. Then 10 more. Ships from a dozen species. Captains who had been ordered to observe but could not watch genocide happen. They charged into the battle, engaging the Kresh bombardment fleet. The Council commander screamed orders at the breakaway ships, demanding they return to formation. They ignored him. A Velthari destroyer, the same species whose representative had spoken most strongly against humans, dove between the Kresh fleet and the planet. It fired everything it had, destroying 3 Kresh ships before return fire crippled it. More Council ships followed. Not the whole fleet, but enough. Enough to stop the bombardment. Enough to show that some people still believed in doing what was right. Admiral Chen watched the Council ships engage and felt hope surge. All ships focus fire on the Kresh command vessel. Let's end this. The combined fleet, human warships, civilian volunteers, and rebel Council vessels converged on Commander Kresh's flagship. The Kresh ship tried to flee, but Captain Okonkwo's fighter wing cut off its escape. This is for everyone who died today, Okonkwo whispered, and fired her last missiles. The Kresh flagship exploded in a brilliant fireball. The remaining Kresh fleet broke and ran, scattering in every direction. The battle was over. Admiral Chen slumped in his command chair, exhausted beyond words. They had lost 8 warships, 20 civilian vessels, nearly 4,000 people dead, but the Hexathi were alive. Sir, the Council fleet commander is demanding to speak with you, his communications officer said. Tell him I'm busy counting my dead, Chen replied coldly. Hours later, after rescue operations had recovered survivors and medical teams were treating the wounded, Chen finally took the call from the Council commander. The commander was furious. You violated direct orders. You interfered with Council authority, and you turned some of my captains into mutineers. I saved lives, Chen said simply. What did you do? You watched. We were following protocol. Your protocol killed people. The argument went nowhere. The Council commander threatened courts-martial, imprisonment, destruction of careers. Chen didn't care anymore. He was too tired. On the surface of Hexathi, Governor Thelen addressed his people. Millions of Hexathi watched the broadcast, survivors who had been pulled from the edge of death. The Galactic Council promised help. Thelen said, his voice heavy with emotion. They arrived in time to watch us die. But humanity came. Humans and their allies from a dozen worlds, in ships held together with hope and determination. They came though we voted against them. They fought though we called them dangerous. They died to save us. He looked directly into the camera, speaking to the entire galaxy. If these are the monsters we fear, then we fear the wrong things. The Terran Federation saved us when the Council would not. They asked nothing in return. They expected no gratitude. They simply did what was right. The broadcast spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species saw Governor Thelen's words. Every world heard about the Battle of Hexathi. They saw footage of human ships dying to protect civilians. They saw civilian volunteers from many species fighting together. They saw council ships breaking ranks to join the fight. Public opinion turned like a tide. On the council homeworld, delegates faced massive protests. Citizens demanded answers. Why had the council watched while others fought? Why had they abandoned their own principles? Why did it take humans to do what the council should have done? Within days, 17 council member worlds officially requested that the human quarantine be lifted. Within a week, it was hundreds. The pressure became impossible to ignore. Ambassador Elena Kovac stood once again before the Galactic Council. But this time the chamber was different. Delegates who had voted against humanity now looked uncomfortable. The Velthari representative who had led the opposition sat silently. The vote was called. Should humanity be granted provisional council membership? 300 delegates voted. This time 270 voted yes. The human quarantine was lifted. Humanity would join the galactic community. The chamber erupted in discussion, but Elena barely heard it. After years of rejection, humanity had finally been accepted. But the cost had been terrible. She gave her acceptance speech, keeping it short and simple. The Terran Federation is honored to join this council. But we want to be clear about who we are. We didn't save Tarsus 4 and Hexathi for council seats or trade agreements. We did it because when someone calls for help, you answer. We hope the council remembers that principle. She sat down to mixed applause. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the memorial wall. They had added thousands of new names. Human and alien, military and civilian. People from dozens of worlds who had died fighting together. Captain Sarah Okonkwo stood beside him. She had survived, but barely. Half her squadron was gone. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. All these people dead. For what? Chen was silent for a long moment, looking at the names. Commander Wu of the Defiant. Vex the Krithari merchant.
Kira the Solan explorer.
Lieutenant Liu, the young navigator who had been terrified but did his duty anyway. Every soul we saved, Chen said finally. Every species that now knows someone will answer when they call. Every child on Tarsus 4 and Hexathi who gets to grow up. Every person who saw what we did and decided to be better. He touched Captain Okonkwo's name on the wall. It wasn't there because she had survived. But so many others were. You tell me if it was worth it. Okonkwo looked at the names, tears running down her face. Yeah, it was worth it. Across the galaxy, something had changed. The Battle of Hexathi became a turning point. Species that had never worked together started coordinating. Civilian vessels started organizing into volunteer rescue fleets. The idea spread that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could be better than it was. Humans continued their patrols, their ships bearing the scars of battle. Other species joined them now, no longer afraid. The Ephrati built a memorial on Tarsus 4 with the names of everyone who died saving them. It became a pilgrimage site, a place people visited to remember what sacrifice meant. The council changed too, slowly. They formed rapid response fleets designed to answer distress calls quickly. They trained together with human forces, learning tactics, learning philosophy, learning that strength without compassion was worthless. And whenever a distress call came, and they always came, there were ships ready to respond. Human ships, yes, but also Ephrati medical vessels, Krithari cargo haulers turned rescue ships, Solan scouts, and ships from 100 other worlds. The galaxy had learned something from the Deathworlders. It wasn't about being fearless. It wasn't about having the strongest weapons or the toughest ships. It was about answering when someone called for help, even when it was dangerous, even when it cost everything, because that was the right thing to do. Admiral Chen retired 5 years later, honored by dozens of species. He spent his final years on Earth, writing his memoirs and speaking to young officers about duty and sacrifice. When asked about his decision to go to Tarsus 4, knowing it would end his career, he always gave the same answer. I'm from Earth, a death world that tried to kill us for millions of years. We survived because we took